Guam needs to wake up and say, you know what? Our direction is not what we want. We can't think small. We got to think big. And, when
Yes.
you talk about people's livelihoods and ability to live a life, not necessarily of their dreams, but at least of their desires, of what they want, for themselves and their family. The kids should always do better than the parents. And
Yes.
the United States and Guam is maybe for the first time facing that their kids won't do as well as the parents.
Yeah.
That's sad. That's very, very
Yeah.
sad. And it doesn't need to be.
Alpha Day, it's your innovation coach, Rob Jackson, and welcome to another edition of the Innovate Guam Podcast, the podcast where we explore all things innovation, technology, and improvement as they relate to the island of Guam. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow me on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Substack. New podcast episodes drop at the beginning of each week. And you can also find my Innovate column in the Pacific Daily News every first and third Friday of the month. All right, today's guest is Mr. Jerry Yingling, a Guam public service leader with a diverse background that spans military service, international business experience, infrastructure leadership, and public policy. Jerry is a proud United States Marine Corps veteran, and that foundation of service and discipline has carried forward throughout his professional career. He has spent time working overseas, including in Japan, gaining exposure to international business environments and global operations. He has also worked in the private sector with major organizations, giving him insight into how large-scale systems, finance, and operations function at a high level. In addition to his professional work, Jerry has been actively involved in political campaigns in the United States. Most recently, he served as the campaign manager for Ms. Ginger Cruz's 2024 run for Congress, where he was directly involved in strategy, messaging, and navigating federal level political issues impacting Guam. Here on Guam, he served in senior leadership roles at the Guam International Airport Authority and other organizations, contributing to the operations and development of one of the island's most critical infrastructure hubs. He currently serves on the Guam Land Use Commission, where he's directly involved in zoning, permitting, and development decisions that shape Guam's growth. And on a personal level, Jerry is deeply connected to the island through his family. He is married to his wife, Vanessa, whose roots tie into one of Guam's most well-known local families, further grounding his commitment to this community and its future. Now, he is stepping forward as a candidate for the Guam Legislature. Ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome to the podcast, Mr. Jerry Yingling. Jerry, welcome to the Innovate Guam Podcast.
Buenas, how are you?
All right. I want to start with you, your background, your experience. I know you have a lot of experience, not just with the government of Guam, but also in private industry, as well as some campaigns back in the States. So I'm really looking forward to getting into a discussion about policy, economic development, government execution, and how Guam actually moves ideas from just concept to real outcomes. But before we get into that, we have a tradition here at the podcast. We start off with some icebreaker questions. And the question that I ask every one of my guests, what is your definition of innovation, and what does innovation mean to you personally?
That's a very big question. And, it goes there's two sides to innovation. There's a good innovation and there's a bad innovation.
Okay.
Socially speaking, I'm, I respect algorithms, and I respect, what power that brings. Unfortunately, it's been used for many of the wrong things. And,
Okay.
social media is quite responsible for a lot of the divisiveness that we have in our society. And
Yes.
that's the downside. On the upside, of course, our lives are better. Virtually everybody's lives are better. When I lived in Laos, which is considered one of the least developed countries in the world, I remember seeing a disabled man with a smartphone that was greater power than what I had in my own phone, and he was able to access his resources for his disability. I mean, it's amazing. If it's
Yes.
used for good, it's never ending. If it's used for bad, unfortunately, the same thing. It's never ending.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So from your experience inside the government and other organizations, what's the one thing the public doesn't fully understand about how decisions actually get made? You've been in the room, so to speak.
Yeah, well, anybody as old as I have been around. But so you said my vast experience. Part of that is my age. Um, well, it's. I would like to think that the decision-making process is really one based on the best outcomes for our people or for the people that are the stakeholders in whatever is being discussed. Unfortunately, we're humans, and human beings always sometimes can't override, not always, often cannot override their personal desires to really
Yeah.
do what is right for all. I mean, that's
Yeah.
it in a nutshell.
Yeah. So personal ambitions really, taking over, even when people start out with the best of intentions, that kind of corrupts. And I guess like the old sayings goes, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And a good friend of mine said, anytime there's money involved, whether it's direct or not, um, you got to ask yourself, are they being true to themselves? And
Yeah.
the answer is sometimes no, sometimes yes.
Mm. Okay. So next question. You've got a diverse history of experiences and stuff. What's the one lesson from your time in the military, private sector, and politics and the public service experience that still guides you today? Your one kind of core value or belief?
It's discipline.
Mm,
Discipline about what you do every day. I mean,
yeah.
I still have trouble not waking up before 5 a.m. every morning. That's a hangover. I mean, I've been out of the Marine Corps for, 50 some years. So, but that never changes. That, and whenever I sit down, I make sure that my back is facing against a wall and doesn't seem vulnerable. Just ridiculous things like that. But
Yes.
discipline is truly, and I see a lot of people, a lot of people speak poorly about GovGuam and GovGuam workers. But frankly,
Uh-huh.
I see a lot of people that are really dedicated and have a great discipline
Yes.
to go about their daily business. And you have to respect that. And
Yes.
I was just going to say something about cynicism, but I don't want to talk about cynicism yet.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So let's go ahead and shift gears and get into the meat of it. We want to start off with you. Who is Jerry Yingling and why are you running for the Guam Legislature right now?
Well, that's a great question. Frankly, when anybody asks me, why am I running? I said, where do I begin? Where do I start? Look, Guam, I've lived and worked all over the world, literally. I worked for Visa International, way back when, and traveled, 192 days, 200 days a year, from my base when I was based in Tokyo. But Guam is different. Guam is probably the most accepting and warm place I've ever been in my life. And that's not to say that all the other places were terrible, but Guam was just really different. And I look at when I first came to Guam. Came here on business back in, I'm going to guess it was 1980-ish, 81, 82. And I look at where we're at now, and we've really, some of the bloom is off the rose, so to speak. You look around and you see all of this trash, derelict cars, derelict buildings. I don't know if I think you're aware of Jonestown. Jonestown was once a very nice community. I can show you one or two streets where within literally, maybe 150 feet, there's 3 derelict homes abandoned. And those things need to be addressed. The derelict cars and the abandoned cars needs to be addressed. There's ways of doing it. I mean, you talk about technology. I mean, look, I would be very upset if DMV doesn't have the ability to do a VIN search, because every vehicle has a VIN number, and you should be able to find who the last person was and go after them to clean up their mess. The same thing with home ownership and stuff. I mean, we have a serious problem with housing on Guam. The military has basically forced everybody out of the market that are just regular working class people. The military stipends that they pay for rent is hard to meet, if you're working down in Tumon in the service industry. And with that, part of what I want to do is figure a way to get some of these derelict buildings and houses back into the housing market. Look, if a family doesn't have the money to demolish and it needs to be demolished, the government, why not create a fund where the government can demolish for them and place a lien, and then when they sell the property, then the government gets its money back. Same thing, if the people don't have incentive to fix it up, figure a way to maybe create a fund to be able to fix the house up, put it back in the market, but the government gets repaid slowly over time. Things like that need to be considered. The legislature, I believe, doesn't really understand how much power they really have. And look at the legislation that created GEDA, Guam Economic Development Authority, and the law that created GVB and the Enabling Act. There's a lot of power that the legislature has, and I think they need to think of bigger things, address bigger problems than they have in the recent past. And that's one reason why I want to run.
Okay. So to narrow it down, what's the one key thing you really want voters to clearly understand about your campaign and what your top priority is if you're elected?
My top priority is to do whatever we can to make Guam a bit more affordable than what it is. And, I don't know if you know this, but, we have over 20% of our population living below the poverty line.
Yes.
We need to start addressing those things to, I can't undo poverty, and maybe we never will. but we can certainly start working towards making it better and easing some of the poverty that we find. One thing that I will tell the voting public out there, you will get no promises from me other than I'll work hard. Because should I prevail in this election, I'm only one of 15. What can I promise? I can't promise anything other than my own behavior. And that behavior is trying to convince my colleagues, if I should be so lucky, to convince them to do what is right for Guam and oppose the things that are not good for Guam.
Okay. Looking at that, once you get into office, a lot of times the bureaucracy gets overwhelming. And even when people have good ideas and good intentions, it's very difficult for them to get things done. What do you think Guam struggles most when it comes to execution?
Obviously, it's the funding. That's a big one. And my feeling about the United States and the world basically is, it's not a lack of funds. It's a lack of priorities. I think a lot of people could go without on certain things, luxuries, and really start nailing what is a necessity. And I think we overlook a lot of the necessities in life. Like I said, how can we have over 20% of our population living in poverty? I'm just astounded by that. I just, a lot of the laws that are created, had a very nice conversation with a woman yesterday. So a lot of the laws that are created to try to help people, sometimes on the back end of it, they create disincentives for people to stay married. That it may be better that if they split up, they get a better income or better privileges. Those kind of things. Look at the laws that we've passed in the last 20 years or so, or maybe about the last 20 years, maybe further back. I mean, we went from 21 people in the legislature down to 15. I'm not going to complain about that, but I think there are certain people in Guam who say, well, that reduces the ability for certain ethnic groups to be able to participate or make a serious participation in government. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. I'm a Howley,
I never thought about that, about kind of the structural disinclusion that it might do.
And the other side of that is, here we are, 15 people, 170,000, give or take, population. That means that each senator is a representative. Now, this is where I get kind of irritated. They're not leaders. They're not executives. They are lawmakers, and they need to be representatives. And that means, believe it or not, that's each senator should represent over 11,000 people. Now, I find that hard to believe that each of those senators of the 15 can actually represent 11,000 people or 11,000 plus people and get.
And of course, they're really not doing it because it's not divided up into districts. You're just at large, representation at large.
Exactly. You're exactly right. And that's some of the anomaly of of Guam, how Guam's structured. Like I said, we're a beast of the Congress. Congress created us. And, I guess we got to live with what we have. And there's a lot of people trying to change it. I mean, look at Ron McNinch over at the EOG. He tries in many, many different ways, whether you agree with him or not. He always has interesting perspectives on things. And, some of it, I might agree with 30% or 50% of one particular thing that he's thinking at the moment, but it's worth us exploring all of it.
Yeah, shout out to Ron McNinch. He was instrumental in pulling me in as an adjunct faculty member over at UOG. So really enjoy talking with him and all of his ideas and stuff. He has lots and lots of different ideas, and like you said, trying lots of different things to stir the pot to get change. As forcing functions for change.
Exactly. If nothing else, there's a great benefit in all of us really considering some of the points that he's trying to make. I came from, well, you mentioned, my background. I came from the States. I was actually appointed by the governor of Georgia. This is way back when, in the 80s. Right after I left Visa International, the governor appointed me to economic development, and and I'll never forget some of the things that they tried to accomplish under the economic development, and a lot of those things can be transplanted here. Their government, their Senate, it's bicameral. Ours is unicameral. I don't see anything wrong with creating a bicameral and trying to get the mayors more involved in a more structured sense with the Guam Legislature. Like a lower and an upper house or something. Because they're the ones that are close to the heartbeat of their villages.
Right.
I think far more than what the legislature can be. And we need to go out. We need to go out and meet as many people as we can all over. But let's face it, the southern part of Guam, just like the southern part of the United States, gets a short shrift. They don't get as much attention as they deserve. That's usually about population, usually about economic activity and things like that. Just like the South doesn't produce the economic activity that the Northeast does. Or California does. And Guam's similar. You don't have a Tumon down in the southern part of Guam, and the roads. Look, we have vast pieces of property, and no roads leading to open up development in the south. You drive through. Look at the huge parcels of land around in the Telefofo. Inarajan area, a huge parcel of land, and there's no roads, There's not enough roads or enough major roads to make development make sense.
Yes. So this is a good segue into economic development. So you worked economic development there for the governor of Georgia. I think you were the vice director of GITA here, and you were probably around when they established GITA, right?
Yeah, well, I'm trying to remember the year that John Martinez is, he goes way back. I think he was one of the original GITA directors. Great guy.
Okay.
You met John Martinez during Ms. Cruz's efforts.
Yeah. Okay. But from your perspective, what are we getting right in terms of economic development here in Guam, and where are we falling short? Because that's a huge fundamental question. I was at the Guam Chamber of Commerce meeting yesterday, and Dr. Roseanne Jones did a really great talk on Guam's economy and how, it's constantly under pressure, whether it be typhoons or wars or economic crisis and stuff like that. It's almost like that's the norm, and that it makes us vulnerable when we just have the two stools, tourism and the military construction buildup to rely on. What's going to be that third or possibly fourth stool to give a little bit more stability.
Well, uh, I think that's a perfect setup for what you're trying to do.
Yes.
You promote. Look at a place like Hong Kong. Look at a place like Singapore. Why are they so successful? Their ability to have telecommunications, to move data, is next to none. And fortunately, we have I think, what do you call them, T1 lines?
Yes.
We have the ability, but I don't think that we have a solid enough infrastructure for big companies to seriously come and look and operate, in financial sector or whatever. The financial sector is a great paying business usually, and it's usually clean too. And Guam could really benefit by having more financials. We missed a great opportunity when Hong Kong was reverting back to China. People were terrified of what China was going to be or not doing for the fledgling democracy that remained in Hong Kong. And I got to give a shout out to Carl Gutierrez. He was the one that pushed to get GTA privatized. And look at that company today. It's actually a great company and doing quite well.
Yeah.
And you took off the shackles of government repression, if you want to call it that. The restrictions that the government usually has on some of their operating entities, and it's done quite well. But we got to do more of that. We really do.
Yeah.
And if we really want to join the big guys.
Yeah. So put your investor hat on. If I'm an investor or a developer, looking at Guam, what are the things that concerns me most today? That's like, yeah, I don't know if I want to put my capital there in Guam, or hey, I see too much risk with me going and entering that market.
Again, I go back to saying that, it's the lack of infrastructure that's going to create any kind of anxiety in people looking to invest some serious money here. Excuse
What
me.
about government service and like some of the processes like permitting and all of that kind of stuff, and how slow it takes to get things done? And, if I'm an entrepreneur and I've got capital tied up and stuff, I can't afford to wait and go through all of this red tape and bureaucracy. I want a, turnkey kind of solution to implement.
That's something that, many of Guam's officials have addressed in the past. And it worked for a while when they had the one-stop center down there in, I think it was in Agana.
It's an Upper Tuman. I think it's still there. It's just more for business licensing. I'm not sure what else it's doing there, but it still exists there in Upper Tuman.
Yeah, but again, a friend of mine went up there and he couldn't find the right person. He got maybe 70% of what he wanted done that day, but had to also come back and then go do some other things to jump through the hoops. But back, I'm trying to remember what years it was. We had the one-stop center down in, wasn't quite Petey, it was past Agana. Anyway, just long story short, they were able
Anigua?
to, what's that?
Was it in Anigua?
Yeah, a little further down, but yes, close to Inigua. And
Okay.
people could literally walk in and all of the agencies were there. Now, over at DPW, you can go up there, but you might have trouble trying to find an engineer or trouble finding the fire department guy. Back, this is around 2000, I think, maybe later, 2002, 2003. No, much earlier than that. This is back in the 1990s. And the people, yeah, every desk was manned, or womaned. There's always somebody there to address your issue. And you'd have your DPW files, and people would stamp off, and they'd set up inspections right away. I don't think that they're doing that now. And you brought up another important issue that I see that needs to be done. You hear people like Jeff Pleadwell complaining about being too many GovGuam employees. I'm not certain whether that's correct or not, but I certainly can say that many of them need to be placed in other areas. We don't have enough inspectors for DPW. We don't have enough people to inspect for food. We really lack inspecting and also enforcement. That's a great weakness that Guam has. And that translates over into people being leery of investing in Guam.
Yeah, because basically government service and the efficiency and competence of the government breeds confidence from investors. If they see that, then that's something that helps them get more confidence, more of a warm fuzzy that this is the right place to put capital. And yes, I want to operate in this kind of environment because I trust what I'm seeing from the government standpoint. And going back to what you said about Jeff, comment about too many government employees. What I've heard it about is not so much just the pure numbers, it's the return on investment, if you will. We've got this many employees, and for that, we're getting this out the back end. That if more was being done or more value was being produced from there, it wouldn't be so much an issue of the numbers of employees we have. So the idea is, how do we do more streamlining of the flow of value of government services from those different departments and agencies to the people who need it?
Look, I think we're habitually short of police officers or law enforcement people. So it's a matter of balance. I guess that's really what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
You got people that are doing, maybe a mediocre job. Why not cross-train those people to also be inspectors, or people that get them certified, stuff like that? There's a lot that the government can do to really redeploy people into a different work environment, as I see it.
Yeah. All right, let's shift gears and get to where you have a lot of experience being on the Land Use Commission here. So I kind of want to start off this area of questions in the context of the Guam Transshipment Task Force report, right? So it highlights issues with permitting delays, zoning issues, and land availability for warehousing, logistics, manufacturing, industrial operations, right? So what is the core problem in Guam's land use and permitting system from your perspective?
Okay, I'm not going to speak officially from GLUC position. I'm just a commissioner.
Okay,
only one guy.
I'll put you on the spot
there. Caveats out there, okay? But no, look, it irritates me. I was just talking the other day. We're talking about housing, and talking about getting more housing available to people. We have a lot of contractors now who are renting out entire apartment buildings on the low end for their workers. And what that does is that keeps many of the young people who are working in service jobs or entry-level jobs from being able to rent an apartment, because they're occupied by a contractor. He has all of his employees. I mean, I have right next door to me, I have one that is, taken by an entire company. And it's that level of rent of between let's say $850 to $1,200 a month. That's possible for a person working a job or two to be able to pay. But instead, you got a guy has a multi-million-dollar contract and has 30, 40 employees occupying the building. That's not right. Now the legislature's done a decent job in trying to change the M1, the light industrial M1 zoning, and allowing it to be used as barracks now. And I think that is a good first step. Originally, when I heard it, I was concerned about it, that they wouldn't have any control over it. What they're doing is they're moving it away from the Guam Land Use Commission and making that just one more allowable activity for M1 property. And like I said, I supported that. I think that's good. It might get some of the apartment buildings opened up and available for middle class people or entry level people.
So what do you think is really the big constraints and impediments that's driving these delays and uncertainty? And if you were king for the day, what would be your first thing that you would try to fix and prioritize in the system?
I don't want to sound too critical of land management because I know that they have their operating rules and policies. Excuse me. But frankly, the amount of hoops that somebody has to jump through in order to get either a variance or to get a change in the zoning law, or trying to get easements erased or something like that. I myself, working on trying a piece of property that had old easements going right in front of our building, that nobody knows who and when it was created, probably back in the Navy days. It took me 3 years to get the easements erased. But rightfully so. Everybody had to check. I had to go through every agency, and even the private industry of the phone companies to find out if any of them had rights to the easement. So there's some sense to the very complicated processes you have to go through. There's some sense to it, but I think that there could be some ways to actually expedite that even more. I had to go back 2 or 3 times. My poor surveyor was going nuts. I think he had to go back 2 or 3 times trying to get the final sign off on the new map. So, it needs work. It definitely needs work.
Yeah.
And look, to give a little shout out to land management, they went from a purely paper-based maps and clutter into something that now is getting much more efficient and much more digitalized. But look, I think they only have one chief surveyor to working for a land management. That's a lot of work for one person to try to keep up with it. So
So I was going to say that definitely it's easy to kind of beat up on the employees of these agencies, and I don't want to be part of that crowd because they're doing the best they have within the system. Rather, I look at critiquing the system, and there are a lot of possibilities that we have in terms of technology and data and digitizing things that can happen if we're able to break away from some of the old systems and some of the old regulations that can do it. My friend over at Pinpoint, Ryan Mummert, is always very vocal about kind of the different possibilities that private sector could bring in terms of digitized government services, if you will. And that then kind of starts with the idea of the government having a data strategy to begin with, because what you find out, whether it be over at Rev and Tax or wherever, you have very siloed data, and it's not necessarily being very well used. And if we really kind of looked across many different agencies and what data we were creating and how we were using it and stuff like that, it would open up a world of possibilities about how we could leverage that data to streamline services and provide better insight into how we make things better in the future.
I absolutely agree. One of my complaints and another reason why I'm running is I don't like how we have agencies and then don't give them the resources to be able to really do the things that really need to be done. I mean, you take GVB. GVB's trying their best, but and we're hurting as an island. We're hurting. But we have 2 derelict hotels down in Tumon. All right, who does that lie with? How do you address those? I think that the legislature needs to get involved in that. And the same thing with DPW. Poor DPW. You have people there doing getting the homeless, the unhoused people problem and dumped on them, and they don't have the resources to deal with it. It's just kind of taking a problem and slapping it on an agency and forgetting about it. And like I said, that's where legislation needs to be addressing these problems. That goes back to my derelict housing, derelict automobiles and stuff like that. And trying to address poverty. I mean, all of that, everything's tied in together.
Right. Yeah. It has to be treated as a system. I'm curious to wonder what you think about what kind of changes need to be done and how Guam manages like land leases and stuff like that for development. I know there was something pushed through the legislature that pushed the lease from 5 to I think 15 years, but it's a step in the right direction. But most real estate developers and serious companies and stuff, they want multi-decade kind of leases to show and ensure access to the property. And that just is a function of the return on investment. Some of the return on investment timelines are measured in decades. So they're looking for 20, 30, 40, 50 plus year leases in order to recoup their investment and for it to be attractive for them to come in. What do you say to that?
I support the long leases. Look, I inherited the bond that duty-free shoppers, then became DFS, invested in the airport. I mean, tens of millions of dollars to bonding so that the airport, we could develop the new airport. And here's people that I think they had I may be misspeaking, I don't know. I think they had a 20-year DFS lease in order to try to recover the funds that they spent to get the bond moving. I'll correct myself later on if I find out that that's incorrect. But it's all the devil's in the details. If it works, then
right.
you need to make sure that it's a square deal. I mean, there are people that will take advantage anytime they see something that let's say a 50-year lease, they jump on a 50-year lease and then sublease it to somebody else and make money off of the government of Guam and actually have contributed nothing to the activity. So you got to be very careful in what is actually being proposed. Like I said, in theory, yeah, long leases, if you're going to be spending $10 million, $15 million, or $100 million on a major investment, you need to have stability.
Right.
And stability comes from knowing that 10 years out, you're not going to lose your lease. 20 years out, you're not going to get your taxes doubled.
Right.
There has to be stability. And that's where, the government of Guam, sometimes we are our own worst enemies. We start attacking ourselves, and we think that, it's only a political battle here locally. But you know what? The world hears it.
Yes.
And investors in Japan or investors in Korea hear some of our own criticism. So we need to be a little bit careful with that and thoughtful about, what we're really saying.
Yeah. So let's transition from leasing kinds of issues to zoning kinds of issues, right? So if Guam is serious about growing industrial operations, warehousing, logistics, manufacturing, do we actually have the land that is properly zoned and supported by the infrastructure? And if not, what needs to change to make that happen so that outside companies do want to come here and set up kind of industrial operations?
Um, I have to kind of revert back to what I was saying about having huge parcels of land and not having decent road access,
Roads,
or water and electrical access to those places. I mean,
right.
And a lot of that is, from the south down, from, let's say, central
Yes.
part to the south, it lacks what it needs to really develop. And, I think about in Georgia, we had partners, Oglethorpe Power, Georgia Power, were our partners in economic development because they know that their company stands to make a return on their investment. So they had very high level guys working with us to do economic development. And, Georgia Power even built a fee simple piece of property for warehousing, built 3 walls and a roof, and then left the back end open. So, and it was probably, I think, a 40,000 or 50,000 square foot warehouse. And what they did was they left the back end open so that if the person needs 100,000, they would lay the concrete and finish off the building and sell the building at cost, or cost plus a little bit.
Okay.
And the same thing with the railroads. The railroads, of course, we don't have a railroad here, but the railroad used to promise to do a railroad spur where people, if they were exporting, like Yamaha Motors went there, and some other companies, they would build a railroad spur where the company could manufacture and deliver right to a boxcar, ship it out.
Right. Yeah, that's great. That's great. Okay. So now I'm going to hand you the mic and let you speak broadly, right? About kind of your vision. If you're elected, excuse me, where you see the possibilities of Guam going, what you want to work toward, and what are going to be your priorities and vision. So I hand over the mic to you, sir, about your vision for innovating Guam.
Well, listen, part of my vision for Guam is restoring some of the bloom that is off the rose right now. When I first came to Guam, we didn't have a lot of the derelict problems that we have now. And being an island, we have some unique issues, like the automobiles. I keep on
Yeah.
harping on that, and I apologize. That's not my main
Well, I
my
live in
main.
Manila, and they're like all over, particularly all of the different arteries out of Manila. You just see all of those abandoned cars
Yeah,
on the side of the road.
yeah, and and the issue is, if you take California, we're not California, but take California. They have companies that will take even some of these jalopies, strip them down from whatever that they can still find being useful, crush them, clean them, take off all of the glass and anything that, like plastics and stuff like that, crush it down, and then resell the crushed metals. We don't have anything like that here. Unfortunately, and this is not a criticism of those who have it, we have some junkyards where cars are parked, and then I think they just virtually almost rot into the ground over years of salt air touching them. And that's not a resolution. Same thing with the tires. We need to find a way to do something about the tires. I know I read about companies that grind the tires, and they can actually make some road pavement materials out of it.
Yes.
I
Yeah, I
have no
was
idea whether
watching
that
that
would.
too.
Yeah, I have no idea whether that do we have enough tires, or would that be something that could be financially viable in Guam? I don't know, but these are the
Yeah,
things we need to
actually,
take a
now
look
I'm
at.
thinking about it. Sorry to interrupt you. It was last week at the conference on island sustainability. There was a lady from Palau who was giving a briefing on their foray into using tires to build different road segments and stuff like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's where it came up. Sorry.
Well, and I was just talking about the lack of some roads into the south. Maybe it's part of the material that could be provided for it. Who knows? Um, these things, like I said, all these things need to be explored, and we need to think big. And I fear that some of the legislators, not all, but I feel some of the legislature doesn't understand what real power they have. Like I said, not giving the agencies the resources that they need. It may require denying certain things in order to get this one agency the resources they need to address the unhoused issue, or denying other things so that GVB can start to address the problems that they have down in Tumon. Giving out money to private companies is not my idea of capitalism by any means, but things need to be addressed. And with the lack of ready capital on Guam, which is one of our major problems that we've always had, the inability to get money to start up a business, or to save a business, or to expand a business is not an easy task on Guam. And part of that is because the only homegrown bank we have here, two homegrown banks, Bank of Guam and Bank Pacific. So
and don't we have some regulations that make it difficult for outside banks to operate, or at least operate the way that they're doing in the States? I find it very, very difficult to get a lot of the banking products that I see in the States. I mean, like even as simple as Stripe and merchant accounts and stuff like that. It's hard to get here in Guam. And it seems like that there must be some kind of regulation or legislation that's inhibiting financial companies to come in here and offer that to the Guam community.
I'll talk to you offline at the moment, but I mean, think about Guam. We're still credit cards or cash.
Yes.
And I mean,
Yes.
give me a break. Even going to, like I said, the least developed country like Laos or Vietnam,
Yes.
Their ability to digitally pass
Yes.
pass payments is
Yes.
easy. The Philippines. The Philippines is
Yes.
probably far more advanced than Guam and much of the United States. The United States has Venmo and things like that, but right now the cost behind PayPal is prohibitive. I
Yes.
mean, and it's
Yes.
all owned by billionaires. Well, the fact that they're billionaires should tell you that they're overcharging.
Yeah. Yeah. But go ahead, Jerry. I keep on interrupting. I said I was passing you the mic, and I keep on jumping in.
Rob, no, I appreciate the conversation. I really do.
Yeah.
It's like I said, we just have a lot to do, and I go back to what when you said why you're running. Where do I start? I said, people. I'll use the word. I think a lot of people in the United States are overusing the word, or maybe they think it's as part of a talking point, but it's not. It's affordability. It's
Yes.
really getting hard to afford to live
Yes.
in Guam. And,
Yes.
I was in Hawaii back in the early 80s on business. The same time I was coming to Guam to do business as well. But, I'll never forget, this is probably 1982 or 83. I went up to a hot dog stand and was charging $7 for a hot dog. Now think about it, 1980,
That's
82.
crazy.
That's
Yes.
that's a hefty price, And I had a small apartment, just temporary because I was there on business. I had a temporary apartment, and I remember spending in 1983. I'm going to say it was probably close to $2,000. Now, granted, it was near Kalakaua, so the main street, but I had to be
Uh-huh.
there because that's where the project was. So, we cannot become like Hawaii. When you
Yeah.
see how the indigenous people, the indigenous Hawaiians, and the people that are born and raised there, they're struggling. And a lot of that struggle, unfortunately, seems to be one of the reasons, or the pain of all that is one of the reasons why they have a terrible drug addiction problem there, just like we're developing. People need to have hope. They need to have confidence in their future. And the way we're going right now with the expenses and being, like I said, look, I'm a veteran, so I don't want to talk bad about the military, but the military having all these young guys being able to rent a house for $2,450, that knocks out a lot of people, a lot of local people. And I know when I was in the military, we slept in bus stations and slept in the bus or in an airplane, or a barracks. We didn't get the hotels and or anything like that, or off-base living. You had to be married and have a couple kids in order to live off base. So I think somewhere along the line, while things are an effort to make one thing good, like for the military, the uniformed service members, to make
Yeah.
their life better in Guam, they're hurting the Guamanians. I have a young mechanic who works on my truck, and he's third generation mechanic, very, very skilled. And the other day he was working on my truck, and he looked at me and he said, "Sir, I don't think I'll ever be able to afford a house. My family has land, and I have a small plot of land." He said, "But I don't think I'll ever can afford to build a house." He said, "I can try to build it myself, but I'll never get through the regulations. It won't be right,
Mm.
And that's a terrible, terrible thing for a young man, 30 years old with 2 children and a wife, to feel that way.
Yes.
And we need to address that. Guam needs to. wake up and say, you know what? Our direction is not what we want. Our direction is not conducive for, I got two grandkids, and one's 3.5 and the other one's 1.5. But what kind of Guam am I going to leave with them for? This is the time. That's why, look, I'm an old guy. I should be retired, but I'm not going to be retired. I hope I can bring some of my experience. And sorry, I wasn't very articulate today, but bring some of my ideas forward in the legislature so that we can start addressing some of these bigger issues. We can't think small. We got to think big. And
Yes.
When you talk about people's livelihoods and ability to live a life, not necessarily of their dreams, but at least of their desires, of what they want, for themselves and their family. The kids should always do better than the parents. And
Yes.
the United States and Guam is maybe for the first time facing that their kids won't do as well as the parents.
Yeah.
That's sad. That's very, very
Yeah.
sad. And it doesn't need to be. It's
Yeah.
a man-made problem.
Yeah, I agree with you. And Jerry, I tell you, this has been an awesome conversation, as I knew it was going to be. Thank you for coming on the Innovate Guam podcast and sharing your ideas and your platform for innovating Guam. Now, if there's people who want to reach out and talk to you, connect with you, support what you're doing, can you provide some information about how they can contact you, or what they can do to contribute or whatever?
So certainly. I'll give my private cell number. It's of course 671-689-9927. Like I said, I wasn't very articulate for your program today. I apologize for that.
No, you were great.
Well, yeah, I'll further organize my thoughts, on some of these issues. But my passion sometimes overrides my my tongue. So and that happens when we start talking about how beautiful Guam was, how beautiful it can be, and what we have right now. So that's
Yeah.
why I get a bit excited about that. But anybody can call me. If you don't know what I stand for, ask. You'll find out that I'm not shy. I don't think anybody's ever made an allegation that I'm a shy man. I'm not.
You have a campaign website that people could visit?
Well, yeah, right now it's on Facebook, Jerry for Guam.
Okay.
Jerry with a J. It's like I tell everybody, Tom and Jerry, the smart mouse. So it's Jerry. And please take a look. And like I said, feel free. If you see me, walk up and talk to me. Whether you like me or dislike me, that's fine. We can't be loved and liked by everybody. But I will, like I said, I make no promises of going into the legislature other than I will work hard. Because when you're one of 15, that's all you can do is to try your best. And I have no problem working with Republicans. I'm a Democrat, but I have no problem working with Republicans. Many of my friends are Republicans, as every American should be. Friends
Yes.
with Republicans, Democrats, and independents. And
Yes.
so if you are still listening, please vote for me. How's that?
All right.
Okay.
So to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Be sure to like, subscribe, and follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and all social media platforms, including Substack. And don't forget to check out my Innovate column in the Pacific Daily News every first and third Friday of the month. All right. And remember, until next time, whether you're at work, at home, or at play, always innovate. Thank you.